The Righteous Ego, a different kind of special one. An extract from a short book about ego by Media Lens. The successful ego, of course, raises itself above others on its special achievements. Football manager Jose Mourinho enraged egos everywhere by saying, "Please don't call me arrogant, but I'm European champion and I think I'm a special one." Sports journalists have never forgiven Mourinho for his comment and love to remind him and us of it every time he's sacked by a club. Is Mourinho still the special one? The journalistic ego deeply resents being a mere commentator on the lives of stars hogging the limelight, just as editors and publishers resent being mere facilitators of their author's work. But while the suffering ego raises itself up on its own special problems, the righteous ego's specialness lies in its unusual concern for the problems of others. The comedy series Seinfeld loved to nail this form of pride. After an uncharacteristically selfless act of generosity, Jerry thinks to himself, "I am such a great guy. Who else could have gone through the trouble of helping this poor immigrant? I am special. My mother was right." Torben Betts has been described as an uncommonly gifted playwright and a political Beckett. In his 2012 play, Muswell Hill, Betts' character Julian is a fine example of a righteous ego. Julian's widow, Karen, reveals that her tormented husband had committed suicide by throwing himself off the cliff at Beachy Head. "Sometimes he could be a right old moody sod, but I understood him, you see. Because he was such a strict vegetarian, he ended up despising all meat-eaters, and because he was such a committed cyclist, he hated all motorists. And he'd get so wound up by people's indifference and stupidity that he used to be so full of, well, hatred." It's not a small thing to rail at the lack of compassion in the people around us. It means that they are all morally inferior. On this basis, our ego will feel entitled to rage, preach and patronize, to assert its dominance over everyone, as brutally as any successful ego or suffering ego. It ought to be a thing of wonder that so many people ostensibly motivated by compassion for human and animal suffering are full of, well, hatred. The complexity lies in the fact that we can be absolutely right. Human beings are often indifferent. The social system is structurally unjust. Western foreign policy is rooted in medieval-style greed and violence, and our egos can hijack being right to justify our own tyrannical abuse. Others may be wealthier, more famous and beautiful, but the righteous ego can slip the surly bonds of ordinariness and ascend to the moral high ground. If we have a political argument with someone we perceive as more conventionally successful, a parent, for example, our righteous ego may fight tooth and nail to establish our superiority in at least this ethical dimension. In short, if the billionaire's successful ego feels superior because it has more financial credit, the righteous ego feels superior because it has more moral credit. Small gestures will do. Having spent decades working for a climate-killing oil company or an international bank, we can point to our vegan diet, our meticulous recycling, or the fact that we read the supposedly left-liberal Guardian newspaper as proof that we are nevertheless more ethical than others. The flimsier the support for the righteous ego, the more fiercely that support will be defended. Even polite, rational questioning of the health benefits of veganism or the left credentials of The Guardian may set the fur flying. A key problem is that the extreme, domineering behaviour of a righteous ego can easily be mistaken for extreme compassion. They're angry, impatient, and abusive because they care so much. In reality, predatory individuals and organisations have always understood that they can hide their crimes behind a screen of fake compassion. British readers will recall how, for 20 years, the BBC's serial child rapist and abuser Jimmy Savile presented a TV programme ostensibly dedicated to fulfilling the dreams of children. Jim will fix it. Tony Blair, who oversaw the Iraq oil grab costing at least 1 million Iraqi lives, made much of his party's ethical foreign policy. The Italian philosopher Machiavelli wrote, "It is not essential that a prince should have all the good qualities which I have enumerated above, but it is most essential that he should seem to have them. Thus it is well to seem merciful, faithful, humane, religious, and upright, and also to be so. But the mind should remain so balanced that were it needful to be so, you should be able and know how to change to the contrary." The crucial word here, repeated twice, seem. What looks like concern may just be cover for a domineering ego. This frequently becomes obvious when the righteous ego is offered a choice between remaining merciful, faithful, and humane and winning mainstream success. Righteous egos pursuing political change, for example, are highly vulnerable to the temptation of transitioning to more standard, successful egos. Time and again, I've seen young, idealistic writers start out on radical websites only to succumb to the lure not just of joining the mainstream corporate press, but of doing so by self-censoring and compromising their message. I've seen wonderfully unique, clear-thinking voices mangled by their struggle to sew in with a double-pointed needle, telling the truth while being accepted, embraced, and rewarded by a heavily filtered media system. We see this tendency throughout modern culture. Consider The Clash, one of the fiercest anti-establishment, anti-capitalist bands of the punk era. Their song London Calling from 1979 was an apocalyptic call to arms. The title mocked the BBC World Service's tradition of beginning its reports, "This is London Calling," much as the Sex Pistols song God Save the Queen mocked the UK's then de facto national anthem. The website Songfacts says of London Calling, "It was the song that best defined The Clash, who were known for lashing out against injustice and rebelling against the establishment, which is pretty much what punk rock was all about." In photo shoots, The Clash were often depicted as a menacing, grim-faced street gang in black leather jackets, Doc Marten boots, and bondage trousers. Music magazines used to sell this Clash gear to fans. The call from London was for popular insurrection. London calling to the faraway towns, now that war is declared and battle come down. In the early 1990s, The Clash resisted a request from British Telecom to use London Calling in an advert. But by 2002, singer-songwriter Joe Strummer had sold the rights to the song to luxury car manufacturer Jaguar for use in an advert. Strummer explained, "Yeah, I agreed to that. We get hundreds of requests for that and turn them all down. But I just thought, Jaguar, yeah, if you're in a group and you make it together, then everyone deserves something, especially 20-odd years after the fact. It just seems churlish for a writer to refuse to have their music used on an advert." Churlish or not, in the 1978 Clash hit, White Man in Hammersmith Palais, Strummer had sung, "The new groups are not concerned with what there is to be learned. They got Burton suits. Ha, you think it's funny, turning rebellion into money." London Calling was used in an advert for the Jaguar X-Type, a sleek four-door aimed at the entry-level luxury segment, and retailing for a relatively modest $30,000. The song was later used in a 2012 British Airways advert and in the James Bond movie Die Another Day. At one point, Strummer actually worked as a DJ for the BBC World Service on a programme called Joe Strummer's London Calling. After the band broke up, another Clash song, Should I Stay or Should I Go, made it to number one in the UK, heavily assisted by its inclusion in the Levi's jeans advert. The Boston Globe commented, "By now you could make a pretty good compilation of subversive music that's been used in ads, with selections from Lou Reed, Perfect Day and a spot for the NFL, Iggy Pop, both Lust for Life in a Carnival Cruises ad and the Stooges song Search and Destroy in a Nike commercial for the 1996 Olympics, the Ramones, Bud Light, once used Blitzkrieg Bop, and the Buzzcocks, Toyota, and even Creedence Clearwater Revival's scathing indictment of America's privileged class, Fortunate Son, repurposed for Wrangler. The famously lefty British band Chumbawamba sold the rights to the song Pass It Along to Pontiac, and then turned their earnings over to a progressive activist network. The Sex Pistols were a major inspiration for the Clash. Tragicomically, the Pistols singer Johnny Rotten later dressed up as a country squire in a commercial selling Country Life butter.